Okay, what's the quickest, easiest, cheapest way to get a divorce? What a terrible question. It's just, I used to get these calls all the time when people would call my office looking for a lawyer. In my experience, people are looking for a legal question for a non legal problem when they ask this kind of question, just because it seems like it's emotionally charged, like particularly the easiest. What's the easiest way to get a divorce? There is no quick way. There is no easy way. There's the most simple, but it's not really easy. And then the cheapest. I mean, if you come to me and you ask me this question, and I'm a lawyer, the quickest, easiest, cheapest answer for me to you is $1,500, right? Which is a not insignificant amount of money, but that's really my way of testing whether you're worth my time as a client. That sounds kind of harsh, but that's the reality of this situation. I'm not providing like nonprofit services. And the biggest thing to remember for me is just that I've got professional responsibilities that are engaged every time that I take on a client that I have to respect. It's like a book, 200 pages of professional ethics that I have to respect. I guess the reason I'm getting to this is it's like if you've ever seen that meme for web developers where they'll say, like, pick two, and they've got them listed: cheap, good, and fast. Well, I think that that's a way of just sort of managing people's expectations when they want a job done, and especially when they want to have, if you want something that's cheap and it's good, it's like you're asking for something that's unrealistic, especially when we talk about the legal requirements of a divorce. Because as we're going to go through this, there's a lot of those. Here's the thing: as a lawyer, I can't do a not good job for you on your documents, right? So good, it's got to be one of those because you're trusting me. My professional opinion that I'm going to uphold all of these standards for you. I can't just slap together something for you. I've got to be able to be sure that I can, be certain that I'm giving you, a quality product here. It reminds me as well of like these things I'll see on Reddit where it's people who are posing questions, especially about like marital problems. Someone will be having a problem with their wife or their husband, and these internet strangers will be very, very quick to throw out like, "Oh, I know the solution. Get a divorce," right? And it's like that's not a solution. All that you're doing is you're trading one set of problems for another set of problems, right? Especially if you've got kids. If you've got kids and you're getting a divorce, your problems are just starting. And I think we kind of know this as a society, as a culture, right? Which is funny because and we're doing so little to actually change the way that we do family law. I'll be honest, in my personal history, I haven't done a lot of divorces, professionally, or personally for that matter. But it was just because of a quirk in the policy. I mostly did legal aid work in family law, and when I started, and for the first probably 5 to 7 years that I practiced, it was almost all unmarried couples because that was the policy. If they were married, it was the Divorce Act, and you didn't qualify for legal aid coverage, which is just kind of unfortunate because you'll notice this stuff once people pick up on something in family law, like a little quirk or a little loophole that they can use to inflict pain on the other side, which by the way, this is a natural outcome of the adversarial process, right? One person's gain is the other person's loss. So you're always fighting for advantage. It's the metaphor of Roman warfare, right? Here's our battle line, and we're going to push back and forward and see who gives, right? That's all. That's what court is. So when people found out that someone can lose their legal aid certification, they could lose their coverage to have like a public lawyer if a procedure was started under the Divorce Act. Sometimes what they do is you'd be halfway through, you'd be sometimes even a couple of years into litigation, and the other side would find this out. They'd refile their documents under the Divorce Act, and then the other side loses their lawyer, right? And then now you've got that advantage. These are the games that people play, right? And it's just because of some policy, they've changed it since. I understand the reason for it. The reason is that, like, let's say people aren't earning a lot of money, but they've got a lot of assets, and they're going to be arguing over marital property. Like, they're going to be arguing about how much the house is worth. If there's a business, forget about it. Because one side's, especially if one guy's self-employed and they're doing cash jobs, oh my God, it's a nightmare, and it's going to be expensive. So they're like, we're not going to pay for a government lawyer, sell off your assets, I guess, is the reasoning. But yeah, and the other thing is, if you're doing a divorce and it's kind of uncontested, then why, and if it's not a really complicated one, then why would the state pay for your lawyer to take care of that either? When on the other hand, there's all of these people who are like, they can't see their kids and it's dragging on for months. And, like, and I'm at a point now where I'm like, that's just an incredibly difficult decision. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't have the answer. How do we allocate resources? This is the same thing with basically like when you get into the nitty-gritty of any uh, question of government spending. I used to do this thing with when I was teaching language classes, and I'd say basically like we'd have an assignment where you get all these government services and you'd say, okay, you've got to cut them to meet the budget. And it's just to get people talking and thinking critically at the same time. And it was always like everybody had different answers. It's never clear cut. These are inherently difficult questions. So, what is the quickest, easiest, cheapest way to get a divorce? All of this to say, there kind of isn't one. You're looking for something I can't give you. And this is why it's hard. It was hard for me to take these kinds of calls. It's because, yeah, there's this feeling of like impotence. It's funny because lawyers, people have these stereotypes, and a lot of lawyers feed off of that. Their power. I can get this done. I can make this happen. But when it comes down to it, a lot of what being a lawyer is recognizing when you can't do something, and trying to explain that to people in a way that they'll understand and hopefully accept. And that's the other thing, like, if you have a problem accepting this stuff, it's not my job to walk you through this and help you come to a state of emotional catharsis. That's on you, and if you are not capable of handling that, I don't want you as a client. I've got my own shit going on. I'm barely holding it together, and I say this all the time, I've got 100 clients, okay? Not literally, but yeah, and most busy family lawyers, at least. Okay, you're one of them. You're 1%. People say they want to be fast, they want a fast divorce. So, what you're saying is you want me to bump in priority everyone else I've been working for the last 5 years. You're number one. You want to go to the front of the line and you want it cheap, right? You don't want to spend a lot of money, but at the same time, you want to have all of my attention right away. It's like, are you being realistic? Especially when there's not a lot to it. As you'll see, a lot of this, it's not like the legal work that takes up a lot of time if you're looking for a clean break. But anyways, let's start there. For the sake of today, I'm just going to assume that this is one of those situations. We both just want a clean break. All right? So it's just like what comes to me is, okay, do you really? Because a lot of the time when people come to me and they say, "Oh no, we figured everything out. We just want a divorce." Right? We just as if all I did had to do was stamp a paper for you. It's like, well, we've got to have a conversation. Again, these are my professional obligations, right? It's like you both just want to you just want a divorce. Well, okay, is there kids? Yes, but we figured it out. Oh, okay, you figured it out, right? Let me guess. You want to share them equally. Okay, so what does that mean? What's equally? Are we talking about a rotating 9-5, 5-9 split? Are you going to do week on, week off? That means you're not going to see your kids for a week. What about holidays? Oh, we're going to split those equally. Well, who gets Christmas? There's only one Christmas morning every. This is what I mean. Is it's like people always come with these like half-baked ideas and they want to do it fast, but they want it, and I have to do a good job. I have to do a professional job, and they want it cheap. And it's like we're going to have a conversation about this. What about summer? What about traveling? You know, have you figured out child support? Oh, yeah, we figured it out. Child support, there's a lot less discretion to it because judges take it so seriously. And there's all kinds of precedent to back up that child support is like sacrosanct. Like every dad has to pay. Oh, she doesn't want me to pay child support. Well, guess what? You file a divorce and she agrees for you not to pay child support. A judge will probably look at that, say, wait a second, you're not paying child support. That's your legal obligation. Come to court and explain to me why. This happens all the time, and they say, "Well, you gotta." So they'll say, "You need to sign a Section 8 affidavit," which just basically means it's an affidavit, a sworn statement that explains your financial circumstances that would justify one of you not paying child support or whatever, you know, cockamamie arrangement that you've cobbled together. Because let's not forget, there's a lot of guys, not just guys, mostly guys, who are trying to play games to get, because every dad I've ever talked to when it comes to child support, they want to pay less. How can we pay less? And for me, I get to the point where if it means $50 less per month, I'm like, just pay it. You can't another 50 bucks. What, you want to spend $5,000 in legal fees so you can save 50 bucks? And at a certain point, it might make sense, right? Like if it's an extra $250, right? That adds up to like 4 grand per year. And if your kids are young, you're looking at potentially thousands of dollars in that case. But make it about the math. But in my personal experience, just they're always like, I want to pay less. Don't we all? Right? Keeping on here. What about the child tax benefit? Right? Have you figured that? So if you go from being together to going 50-50, you're going to split that child tax benefit. That might mean the difference between a stay-at-home mom who's now a single mother having to work or not. And that's where the fights start. Wait a second, I've got to get a job now? After they've been out of work for a few years? It's like, have you figured out all of these things? So that's just if there's kids. And that's, for me, that's the source of most of the most crazy conflict in family law. If there's property, it's like the easiest ones are when you don't have anything. In that case, yeah, we probably got a straightforward divorce, right? We're just going to keep what we've got right now. That's like an easy separation agreement. You know who's going to keep what. She keeps her car, I keep mine, we keep our own debts. Easy. But this is what it comes down to. Have you run the numbers? Especially like you got to keep in mind, you're not thinking straight. You're thinking emotionally. And if you're not, you're probably a psycho. And I say that without judgment. Psycho is pejorative, but you're not reacting. You're not having a human reaction. You might be in freeze mode. You might not even understand what's happening to you. This happens all the time. The craziest thing for me doing family law, one of the questions I would always ask was like, why did you break up? That's not a legal question and it doesn't have a lot of bearing. Like the court doesn't care who cheated on who. but it just helps us to understand where you're coming from. And what I found so baffling was how many of my clients I could tell they would stop and they would think, and I'd be like, "You haven't ever considered this, have you?" And that's what makes family law so difficult and expensive, is we have to spend so much time excavating and processing the past. This is why, look, this is not legal advice. None of this stuff is. Yeah, we haven't signed a retainer. Like, don't even go there. But if I can give you an advice as a person, it sounds cheesy, but in my experience, it's 200% accurate. You got to figure out yourself emotionally before you start taking on all of this other stuff, because it's not about the law. That's not the source of your conflict. I mean, it can provoke conflict, it can amplify conflict, yeah, but that's not what keeps people going into court for 7 years. It's something with you, and if you're not willing to figure it out, you're gonna be paying lawyers, or you're gonna be mucking through it yourself. You're gonna be sitting there with 1,200 pages on your desk in front of a judge going, "It's right here, it's right here," you know? Even if you can kind of manage it, like, it's hell. Why would you do that to yourself? Run the numbers, okay? And so I haven't done a lot of financial stuff with family law. First of all, legal aid, my clients are mostly broke, which I used to joke with them. I would say, because they had a higher net worth than I did, because they had, you know, much less debt than I did. So I just found that funny. But run the numbers. And especially if there's like a business involved, like I say, if one of the parties, dad, is hiding money, um, you can take him to court and you can try to get the court to order him to pay for your lawyer, especially if he's doing something funny, right? They call it suit money. That's more for a divorce. I haven't even talked about spousal support, and but it's just like if one of you is disadvantaged in the marriage, I don't want to make this about spousal support. All that I'm saying is, like, if you come to me and you say, "We just want a clean break," I've got to run through all of these questions. That's me being diligent. That's me doing a good job, because that's all that I can do. For the sake of today, geez, what are we at? I've been talking for 17 minutes. See? Like, okay, let's say I'm billing at something ridiculous, $500 an hour. So we're going to round this up to 20, because well, it'd be 18. 18 times 3. So 50. 150 bucks just for that speech, when you could just watch this video. Or, anyways, okay, let's keep going. We're on the clock here. For the sake of this video, let's assume we've got an easy divorce. Double income, no kids. No one's relying on the other. We're going to say we're both giving up our claims to spousal support, alimony. No kids. We don't have to muck around with that. All property issues. We were renting. We kept our own property. We've got no substantial debts. With nothing to fight over. Okay. An easy divorce. Okay. It's not easy. It's not easy. And so, okay, what I've done here is I'm always going to try to refer to the New Brunswick version, because that's where I practice. I'm not, like, again, there's no legal advice here. I'm just going to run through a document that's posted online. I'll try to get a link to it, but it's a free resource on how to do your own divorce, and this is for New Brunswick. Okay, easy divorce for doing it yourself, because we want to do it cheap. You want to do it fast. That's up to you. It's not fast. You're going to find out why right away here. Okay, 7 steps to doing your own divorce. Here's the checklist. Step 1: prepare your petition for divorce. What the fuck is a petition? It's like an application. What's an application? It's a court form, okay? So they give you two options. Doing a divorce by yourself, use Form 72A, or petitioning the court together, use Form 72B. This is like a joint divorce. That's when you're filing it together. And a divorce by yourself, you file it, you have to serve the other person. What's the difference between these? It's just like, what I have been taught is that it's easiest just to do the divorce by yourself because for some reason in our jurisdiction, the courts didn't like it when there was a joint petition, when two people come together, say we want a divorce. I think maybe they have issues with a potential conflict of interest. Let's say you hire a lawyer to do a divorce for two people. I don't even know if I don't think you can do that anymore. You'd have to get the other person to get independent legal advice. And what I was told is that in this jurisdiction, in the Moncton, New Brunswick area, is that they would always get you to, they would pull you to court. So you say, okay, here's an easy divorce. We've separated, we figured everything out. Just give us, stamp the paper, give us the divorce judgment. And they would say, okay, now you've got a court date. You've got to come to court and explain this to a judge. Which, like I'm giving that example of the child support. That's the sort of stuff what happens when one child, sorry, when let's say one of the parents doesn't want to pay child support and the court questions it. They say, wait a second. So this guy's making 80,000, mom's making 40,000, but he's not paying child support? No, come to the court and explain this to me, right? It's to avoid like excesses or avoid someone missing something. But, and then you'll see these cases where it's like, this is a straightforward divorce. Why are we wasting court time on this when they're clearly on the same page? So what I've been told is you just file it by yourself because, and this is strictly experience speaking, and not even my experience, the experience of other lawyers. They say, don't waste your time doing a joint divorce. How would you know this if you're doing it on yourself? You don't, right? This is what you're paying me for, right? My accrued experience. That's step one. You've got to decide which one of those. Where do you get the forms? They don't tell you here. I mean, they tell you later on, but just here's what you do. Form 72A New Brunswick Family Court Form. Google. And then you see what comes up. And guess what? Those forms aren't going to be straightforward. Sometimes there's problems with the form. Sometimes they'll forget a checkbox. And or you don't know what the question they're trying to ask you is. What am I supposed to answer here, right? This is what you pay a lawyer for because they've done this stuff before. There's no magic here. Okay? So you've got to complete this form, which is, I don't know, 10 pages. And they're confusing. They're inherently confusing. You're going to see there's going to be entire sections, 3 or 4 pages that don't apply to you. And you don't know, should I fill this out anyways? Are they going to reject it? And if you miss something important, they will. So, I've got my divorce form done. You send it in and you miss something. So they send it back to you. And it takes them 3 weeks to send it back to you, sometimes more. All the courts are behind. So you're waiting 6 weeks to be back where you were before. This is step one. Okay. Step 2, file the petition with the registrar along with attachments and fees. So you remember what a petition is, do you? It's that application, it's that form you just filled out, sent it, it got bounced back, you did it again, you file it. You file it with the registrar. Who's the registrar? They've got an address here, Registrar Court of King's Bench in Fredericton, along with attachments and fees. What attachments? They don't say. Okay. Usually what that means is an affidavit and a financial statement. What's an affidavit? You see, this is why it's so complicated. It's because everything has to be explained and we're using different legal language. It's like learning a whole new language law. This is like I did law school in French. It wasn't hard. It wasn't hard because learning it in English, there's all different words that I'd have to learn what they mean anyways, right? That's why it's so hard for people to do their own divorce. And that's why it's not easy. Get that through your head. There's no easy way. You got to go through it. Okay. So, how do I know if I need an affidavit? If you show up with your papers and you're asking that to the clerk, they're going to say, I can't give you legal advice. And you know why? It's because they have 50 annoying people like you. And that's, you're not annoying, you're feeling hopeless, feeling this uncomfortable, feeling out of your element, right? And you're emotional and you're grasping. It's like watching a drowning person sometimes, especially if someone's getting hammered in family court and you can see them visualizing their life ending because of that, because their life is ending. The life that they had is over and now you're broken up and the life you thought you were going to have is gone. Like it's like you're mourning this at the same time as you're getting hammered with all of these requirements, right? So to come back to the question, what attachments do I need? It depends, right? Like for a divorce, you probably, for a divorce specifically, you were married. Do you know what the legal implications are? It's like, why don't we start here? Do you even know what you're getting yourself into? You probably don't. There's no application form. Look, I'm getting fired up here because I'm so frustrated, but it's like the most significant contract you can undertake as a human being legally is probably marriage. Aside from like joining the army where they can like basically kill you, you know, because two people legally become one. Yeah, it's kind of a biblical thing, but like they take it really seriously. This is why husbands and wives can't testify against each other. It's not like we're not being nice here. It's the legal interpretation where if two people become one, a person can't be forced to testify against him or herself, their self. Do you get that? So all of your shit, all of your property, one person. And I mean, this is why they used to change their names, or lots of people still do, which I think is weird, but whatever. It's like when you get married, you become one person. So if you got to figure out property, then you've got to cut it in half and you start. That's the principle, is an equal division, right? But if you want, let's say one side wants more than the other, right? And by the way, that's not an easy or a cheap divorce. Like if you, and that's part of it. If you want an easy, cheap divorce, you're probably going to have to give up some stuff. Maybe it's not worth it. How are you going to know? Talk to a lawyer, you know? Like, and I know that it always comes back to talk to a lawyer, but it's like, what are you going to figure this stuff out yourself? Maybe you can. Some people do. Good for them. And I've met self reps people who represent themselves in court, and some of them can do it, but it's like the ones who do, it's like, do you want to be that guy? Do you want to be spending 8 hours in the law library by yourself with everyone being like, why is that guy here? Like, power to you, but it's like, or you could pay someone. Step two, file the petition with the registrar with your attachments, whatever those are. Guess what? If you don't have the right attachment, they'll kick it back and you start back where you are. That's the theme here. If you don't, they're called steps for a reason, because until you finished one, you can't go to the next one. Stop skipping steps. This is the story of my life, right? Skipping steps is not going to help you. So they tell you, wait for the registrar to return the petition to you with a court file number. This could take 2 to 3 weeks. See, this is one of the things that can confuse you, is that there's going to be a part in the form that says, what's the court file number? And you're going to say, I don't know. And you're going to spaz. And you're going to say, oh no, is this going to return because I don't know the court file number? You have to file it with the court and they give you a court file number. And you wouldn't know that unless you've done it 100 times already. Keep in mind, you're not going to get a court file number until it's filed correctly. So it could take 2 to 3 weeks to get the documents back where they say, we need more documents. In which case, you have to figure it out again, give them what they want, send it, and then wait another 2, 3 weeks. This is why it's not fast. Figured it out? Sorry, I'm just frustrated with all of this. Step 3, there's 7 steps, by the way, so we've done 2. Step 3, serve the divorce petition and attachments. Hmm. Okay, that's easy. You just serve them. What's serve mean? It's like, you see what I mean? We're learning a new language. Serve means legal service, like that's what you see in the movies. Or you, John Smith, hands you an ominous manila envelope. You've been served, right? That just means you've gotten physical carriage, you've got possession of the court documents. You can't come back and say, oh, I didn't know what was going on. This is a really big principle in our legal system. It's like notice. And service is how you give notice to another person. You get their attention so that they have knowledge and they can't deny knowledge. You have proof, evidence that the other party knows what you're trying to do. Now, here's the catch: you cannot serve the petition yourself. And I think this is like this is easy why they came up with this rule is like these vindictive people who are going to divorce each other. You got served. Like it's like all of these rules. There's some idiot who went too far with one of these. There's probably times when like people have spazzed and ends up with assault charges, right? So they said you can't serve this yourself. Serve just means you give it to someone, right? And there's all sorts of other rules because if the other side's not playing by the rules, here's a fun game. Oh, I'm going to avoid service. I know the other side's going to be divorcing me, but I also know that they can't start the process until I've been served. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change my address, not tell them. I'm going to not answer funny phone calls. Someone knocks on my door, I don't answer. So there's a whole series of rules of how you can get around this. I remember when I was doing family law and we had trouble serving people, what I would do is go with Facebook because you can email them the documents and then you get a seen message. And that was usually enough. But like, this is what I mean. It's like if you want an easy and a cheap divorce and the other side's not playing by the rules, it's not going to be easy and it probably won't be cheap. How much does it cost to serve someone? It depends. Lawyer answer, but it's like usually in the Moncton area, you can get it done for less than $200. I mean, you can also get someone else to do it, right? But do they know what they're doing? Do they know what to do if the other side starts doing something funny, right? Because you can't serve it yourself. Oh, can I get my friend to do it? Sure. Well, it's like, what happens if they say, well, I'll leave the documents at the front door, or I'll leave it with someone else who's there. Is that enough? It might be. It's going to depend on the circumstance. It's going to depend on the rules. And you don't know what the rules are because why would you? You're not a lawyer. So that's why the easiest thing to do, get this, the easiest thing to do is hire a process server who does nothing but serve people who don't want to be served, find people who don't want to be found. It's not cheap. You're going to burn $200 just to get this thing served. You must serve your spouse within 6 months. Is that easy? Is that fast? Probably not. Because here's what happens. People get the documents and they haven't even started to look at this. Well, how do I serve someone? And usually what I'm just saying, what people can do a lot of the time is they'll put it off. They'll procrastinate because it's something you don't want to do. They'll procrastinate. They'll wait until month 5 to start figuring it out. And this is when they call a lawyer, right? When they're already behind, when they've already screwed it up themselves. Wow, there's a lot coming out here. I'm glad I'm getting this out. So you serve them, and then that's step 3. You wait for your spouse to reply. The time allowed depends on where your spouse lives. So that's the thing. You can serve them, but then the other side sees what you're asking for. If you're on the same page, there's going to be no surprises here. In which case, what the other side can do is just simply not answer. And ideally, that's how you get a quick divorce, right? Keep in mind, you've already been waiting. You've had to prepare the documents, which usually takes months. Then you've got to file it, which is another 2 to 3 weeks. Then you've got to serve it, which takes as long as it takes. I mean, you've got a maximum of 6 months. But if you're diligent about it and you look into it ahead of time, you can usually get it done in a week or two, especially if the other side is on the same page, right? Here's where okay, so here's where it gets complicated. Imagine you serve it, the other person looks at it and says, "Wait a second, I want to talk to a lawyer." They have that change of heart. Then they go talk to a lawyer. That lawyer says, "I think you got a claim for spousal." Wait a second, how much is he making from his business? Wait a second, how much did the house appreciate that he's keeping? Right? And then now we got lawyers involved. Guess what? Not going to be cheap, not going to be quick, certainly not going to be easy. Maybe there's stuff that you've been putting off thinking about or talking about with the other person that suddenly comes to light, right? Like, so, but this case, we're just best case scenario, we're on the same page. Let's say the other side just simply doesn't reply, but you've got proof of their service. Step four, prepare the trial record. That's the package of all the relevant documents you need to file with the court. Look, good luck. In my experience, it would take me usually an afternoon to file a trial record, right? And I'm a lawyer. Like I've done a lot of trial records. I've done dozens of trial records. You, first of all, what's a trial record? Again, you're sitting there at the clerk's office at the counter saying, "What's a trial record?" Maybe they'll give you a little bit of direction because at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to clean up the mess that you file to a certain extent. I mean, but you have to like read the rules of court and understand what exactly is needed in there. And they say, "Oh, you need an index." What's an index? It's a table of content. It's like, and then because here's what the judges want, and they never get. Not that they never get, but especially with self-represented people, what self-represented people tend to do is bring all of their documents in a friggin' gym bag and then dump them on the judge's desk and say, "Read all of these, and you'll see that you'll agree with what I'm saying," right? Here's what the judges, please, these poor judges. All that they want is like a table of content that says, page 1 is this document, page 8 is this document, page 27 is this document, and they're all stuff that they've seen before. So they can pick it up, look at the front page, and have an idea of where they're going to go with it. The first thing that any judge will do when they pick up your forms is they'll jump to whatever page the claims are on. Claims is what you're asking for, and that helps. That's where the judges start. I mean, or at least that's where I would start. What do you want me to do? Okay, based on which laws? That's ideally at claims and then rules of court and legislation. This is what I want you to do. Here's the legal foundation for it. Oh, I see section 7. Oh, I see section 8, right? Oh, he's asking for parenting time. Just a little bit of order. And it's just because there's so much insanity with these family files. I'm starting to get tired here. You've got to file proof of service. So you need an affidavit from the person who served. That's what I mean. Service is about proving the other side knows. So you need an affidavit from the person who served them. The process server will do this for you automatically. You pay them 200 bucks, they'll give you an affidavit of service. So it's already done. If you get your friend or your sister to do it, they're going to have to write an affidavit. How do I write an affidavit of service? I think it's Form 18B in the Rules of Court. Where do I find that? It's just these are all questions that a lawyer can answer quickly and directly, or they can just do it for you. That's what you're paying me for, right? So you have to prepare all of this. And a trial records, this can be anything from like 100 pages to theoretically thousands. Like there's family cases. Once you start going on a big contested family case, with years of litigation, that's when you start seeing lawyers carrying those legal boxes. Can you imagine that? That's what I have to be responsible, knowing what all of those stupid papers say, and they all say the same. It's like every single time I would have these clients bring in their text messages or their emails. 90% of the time, I read through all of it, which is exhausting and toxic. And the conclusion I draw is, wow, these people really don't know how to talk to each other. Like, it's not, "Oh, wow, it's so clear that it's this one person who's the problem." And sometimes it is. But you then in that case, you're trying to convince a judge you're not like the 90% of other people who are just simply toxic communicators. Get your trial record together, okay? And then you file it with the court. Now you filed that. Everything that you filed and the other side has filed, if they filed anything, all of the attachments, and you wait for your clearance certificate from the Central Divorce Registry in Ottawa. This could take 2 to 3 months. You want it easy, you want it fast. Like, look at this bottleneck. Why does this bottleneck exist? I'll tell you why. It's jurisdiction. It's because, according to our Constitution, it's like a little quirk where it's like divorce is the federal government's jurisdiction, but it's like or like divorce and marriage, but like the celebration of marriage is the provinces, or it's the reverse. Like, it's what it amounts to is that you have to get the certificate from the federal government. Well, everything's taking place in the provincial government's courts. Like, why? Like, I'm so convinced that these are the sort of things like that chews up 2 to 3 months. That chews up 2 to 3 months. That kills people's momentum. It gives people time for them to overthink things and build new conflicts. I'm so certain that you get some smart college student, like a new computer sciences engineer, you could come up with an algorithm that could do this with the click of a button, like the verification. See, and there's the problem, right? So then the people who are manually for 2 to 3 months letting this sit in a box and they read it over, and where do they have their jobs, right? It's like, and it's not even like there's a lot more valuable work, in my opinion, that they could be doing, but they're used to doing that kind of job, so they're afraid of the change. And then you've got all of this government lethargy and all of these different committees and these ministry heads that gotta have to weigh in. But it's so clear to me. It's like, why does this 2 to 3 months of delay even exist? And I'm sure that there's reasons. I've got my theories, right? But like, this is the sort of thing as a lawyer, I'm like, we got to do this. And you're like, why? And I'm like, I don't understand it either. But you're going to be sitting for 2 to 3 months to get this certificate from the divorce registry in Ottawa. Get it back, the clearance certificate, and next we have to file the trial record. So file everything, that big pile of papers you've already got, file your trial record, swear your affidavit of evidence, and send it to the Court of King's Bench Division in your judicial district. You need to file that clearance certificate. So you can imagine someone who doesn't understand what a clearance certificate is, they say, well, I filed the trial record. This is where the delays build. We file it, it gets kicked back because you missed something, and we start from scratch. Let's say you did it right. You got the clearance certificate there. Now it goes through, it's reviewed by the court. This is best case scenario. A judge looks at it and says, makes sense to me. So now you have to wait for your divorce judgment. See, this is why it's confusing, right? It's like you've got to get a clearance certificate, then a divorce judgment, and divorce judgment comes from the court. So, and then you've got these family court judges who are already like, people are waiting 5 years to get court dates, right? And then they say, well, here's a really easy divorce. And then they go through all of the scenarios that I just ran through. Like, who's trying to get out of something? Did they miss a checklist? Because the judges, as much as I'm concerned about my ethical obligations, the judges are hypersensitive to that stuff. Boy, I don't want, anyways, I'm not going to go there. But so a judge has to review it. What it says here, for an uncontested divorce, this could take 4 to 6 weeks. Longer if you have errors or omissions or you need a court hearing. This is what I'm talking about when I said sometimes a judge won't accept it and they'll say you need to come to court. Like, and I've heard what sound like crazy things. Like, I've heard of like uncontested divorces, the other side that has been served and hasn't filed any documents in response. So the other side has been served. They know that what the other person wants, and, like, they haven't filed anything in response. They don't show the judge will review it, say, "I want a court hearing to understand what's going on here." The other side doesn't show up, and then a lawyer for the person who filed it has to argue for a day in an empty courtroom with the judge to get a divorce. It's like, how does that make sense? People who are waiting for, like, months and sometimes years to get a judge to look at their file, and we're burning a day of court time for an application that's unopposed. Look, and I don't know more of the circumstances. There's probably more of it. There's always two sides to a story, right? But this is what I mean when we talk about court delays, especially in family court. I'm like, the way that, why don't we just talk about how we're currently using our time in family court? And okay, as much as this is emotional for the people who are involved, who are parties to these kinds of proceedings, let's not fool ourselves. It's emotional for the judges too. It's emotional for me as a lawyer, just seeing people making the same stupid mistakes, seeing people who are being vindictive, who are causing pain for the sole purpose of causing pain. And for that, and that's a sick thing about it. That's where you make your money as a lawyer in these high conflict adversarial proceedings, because those are ones that take all the time. And we're spending all of this energy, like folk and getting drawn into these. So this is what I say with the judges, and I feel this is just my theory. I feel like a lot of them have as little insight into their own emotional reactions to these sorts of situations as our clients do, because we're fucking human beings. Me too. I had emotional reactions to these things, to these situations, to these terrible people. Most of the time it's just really hurt people. You know, it's just really hurt people. You get your divorce judgment. For an uncontested divorce, this could take 4 to 6 weeks. So, best case scenario, after waiting 2 to 3 months for that clearance certificate, another month and a half, probably. Longer if you have errors or omissions. And then you get your divorce judgment. Your divorce becomes effective on the 31st day after the date of judgment, unless one spouse appeals. You see, there's all of these exceptions, right? But at this point, you don't care. Once you hear from the judge, you'll either get called back to court and you have to explain everything to a judge so they accept it and give you the divorce, or you don't hear back, and then one day you get an email or a letter. Here's your divorce. Like, it's just and like, having gone through this process with so many people, like, even if it's just waiting for an answer from a court date, a trial date, and that'll take, 4 or 5 months. It's so traumatic. You're waiting, 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 waiting. This thing is years in the making. You've gone through all of these steps, right? We're at step 6, getting your divorce judgment. And then just boom, one day that's it. And people are always like, "So that's it?" And it's like, "Yeah, that's it. You wanted your divorce." When you say you want a divorce, you're looking for a divorce judgment. One last step, wait for the 30-day appeal period to end. This is more of a lawyer thing, but for a reason, right? If there's something in that divorce judgment that the other side doesn't like and they want to fight it to a higher court, which is usually a waste of time with family. I'm not going to go off on that right now, but it's just like 30 days, potentially, it could still be overturned, right? And then that appeal process starts, and it's even more complicated and procedural. You- Anyways, family appeals, my gut reaction, most of the time, they're a waste of time and money. But After that 30-day appeal period, and they still might, people will still do this. They'll miss that appeal period, and they'll come back and say, "Oh, I've got a good reason for missing the appeal," in which case there's a procedure on whether they should hear the appeal. After that, you get your certificate of divorce. This is your proof of divorce. You have to apply for it 31 days after the date of the divorce judgment. And it costs like $7. And you have to apply to that to the registrar in Fredericton. So this is, and then it's like, what's the difference between the divorce judgment and the certificate of divorce? I'm just like, the problem is people come to you with an idea in their head that isn't accurate to begin with. I want a divorce. And frankly, a lot of the time in their mind, they're thinking of a state of mind. They're like, when is this over? And I'm like, bro, I'm a lawyer. All that I do is move pieces of paper around. So it depends. If you're asking for a divorce judgment, maybe you need this for financing, you know, a certificate of divorce. It's just like, what'll they accept? Give them both. If it's something like that, they just want proof that your divorce is finalized and you can qualify for new financing on a home or a car or whatever on your own. It's like there's still so many unanswered questions. But that's, in summary, those are the 7 steps to a quick, easy, cheap divorce, which is none of those things. It's really doing your own divorce, which is what this has turned into. Which, to me, people say cheap, easy, and fast. I'm like, don't ask me as a lawyer for that, because I don't have it in me to give it to you, especially with the divorce if your life is messed up. Sorry. To do your own divorce, step 1, prepare your petition, prepare your paperwork. Step 2, file it with the registrar in Fredericton. Get your court file number. Step 3, serve your documents. Wait for a response. Step 4, prepare a trial record. Get a clearance certificate from the Central Divorce Registry in Ottawa. Step 5, file the trial record. Wait for your divorce wait for your divorce judgment, which could take longer if you need a hearing or if you've made mistakes in your paperwork. Step 6, get your divorce judgment. Wait 31 days. Step 7, ask for your certificate of divorce. Got it? Clear as mud, right? Guess what? If you're in Moncton or St. John, the procedure is different. I don't know. I've been in Moncton for a while, and that's where I practice family law mostly. So, or in St. John. It's basically the same thing. It's similar steps. But this is what I'm saying, is that imagine if you read it and you didn't scroll down, or you missed that part in the beginning, which said if you're living anywhere else in the province. This is why the answer you get from lawyers so often is it depends, right? Anyways, so look, I'm almost at an hour, 53 minutes. Yeah, so for billing, that's an hour of billable time, whatever your lawyer bills. $250, $500, somewhere between there. For me to give you this information as a client, I'd bill you for an hour. That's how it adds up. And we haven't even started for me to explain all of these things. And of course, I'm not going to explain to you how to do it yourself, but for an hour of my time to explain to you, and we haven't even gone into anything specific. Let's say we take a left turn when we talk about the kids. It's more time, more expense. So what started as a discussion about what's the cheapest, easiest, quickest way to get a divorce turned into how to do a divorce yourself. But as I hope you've figured out by now, doing a divorce by yourself is not cheap. Well, that's on you. Are you going to hire a process server and muck through it yourself? It's not easy, that's for sure, unless unless you've completely followed everything I've said here and you've understood everything perfectly the way it needs to be understood without any omissions or errors. I'll tell you what, it's not fast. This is what we've got. This is the system we're working in, right? Do you start to understand why divorce and why family law is so difficult? Because we start with emotionally charged situations. It's trauma, you know, especially with divorce. We got married, we probably told each other till death do us part or some equivalent. And this is what's different. And this is kind of why I have a different approach to divorce as opposed to unmarried. I'm more comfortable with unmarried. It's just like it makes more sense to me, probably because I've never been married or yeah, I never like of course, I didn't have like dreams of my wedding day. Can you imagine if you did though? Can you imagine if you had dreams of your perfect wedding and it all crashes, the person isn't who they thought they were, the person isn't doing what they said they would, and then you have to deal with all of that emotion. It's that trauma. I thought this was going to happen, and then life took a different turn. And it took a different turn that makes me think less about the people that I care about. It makes me question my own judgment. Divorce. What if it's your fault? Right? I'm not the person I thought I was. Geez, I cheated on my wife. Who am I now? And then your kids, and so you're dealing with all of this at the same time as you're dealing with extremely demanding legal requirements, and the same time your finances are under the most pressure ever. You got to pay for the lawyers or you got to pay for, like, it's just cheaper for two people to live together. You're sharing expenses. Now you've each got to pay for yourselves. So you've got all this expense, all this stress, all of this emotion at the same time as you're trying to deal with this extremely complicated stuff. I don't want to make you lose hope, but I also want to give you the 2x4 of reality just right in your forehead. Like, this is your situation you're facing. So, what are you going to do about it now? Right? Yeah, we'll end on a positive note. So, I'm going to tell you again, it's not about the law. And some people might think that it's unethical, but I absolutely believe this. But like, the system's not there to fix your problems. The legal system is there to provide a legal answer to legal questions. It's not there to fix your life. It's not there to bring justice to whatever your ex has done or is doing. And rethink what you mean when you say a divorce. Because most of the time, here's the thing, if I'm centered and I'm grounded and I'm in that situation, what I think I want when I say a divorce is I want to be able to move forward in my life without the weight of the past. And I'll tell you what, you're not going to get that from a court. That's a decision you can make inside in your heart. And frankly, if you don't make that decision, you're not going to get what you want. This is the problem. People come to us as lawyers with problems we can't fix, and a lot of problems that we can be useful for. But I'm not going to save your soul, not as a lawyer. I might keep you out of jail though. God, this is an hour. I thought this was going to be a 10-minute video. Okay, I'll leave it there. So I hope that was helpful. Good luck